Hello, welcome back to Algebra. We're in Chapter 7, Section 4, looking at solving polynomials of equations in factored form. Alright, so these are already in factored form. If you'll recall, standard form is where we have something like x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. That's standard form. In factored form, we have two factors like this. Okay, so one way that we can figure out that what x is here is we know that anything times 0 is 0. So either 2x equals 0, okay, or x minus 4 equals 0. And so I can solve each of those either here by dividing by 2, and then x equals 0, or here by adding 4 to each side, and then x equals 4. So there are two solutions. Solutions, also called zeros, because those are the values that make this 0, or also called roots. Okay, so three terms that you need to know that means the same thing. So we're looking for the zeros up here. Now this is super easy. X minus 3 is equal to 0 when x is 3, right? Or we could just add 3 to each side, plus 3, so x equals 3. And then x minus 9 equals 0. We just add 9 to each side, plus 9, x equals 9. Now you can also see that if it's in this form, you know that we just need the opposite number there. So this would be 3, this would be 9, would be the solutions, or the zeros, or the roots. Okay, if we want to factor out the greatest common monomial factor from this, okay, factoring out means I'm going to look at this and see what do they have in common. Well, this has a factor of 4 and this has a factor of 4. So I can pull out a 4 out of each of these. That means divide that by 4, divide this by 4. And then each of these have an x. This means x times x times x times x. So, and this means x times x times x. I hope you can still see that on your screen. Here we have 3 factors of x. There we have 4, which means they each have 3 in common. So 4 to the third. So we're going to factor out 4x to the third. That means divide each of these by 4x to the third. That cancels out the 4 and leaves me with one factor of x, x to the first power, or just x, and then plus 24 divided by 4 is 6, and then x to the third divided by x to the third is this. So now I've factored out the greatest common monomial factor. All right, and here we go. We want to solve this right here, and we're going to have to factor. So we're going to solve it by factoring, because we don't have any multiplications, and we want to use the zero product property here. So factor out, what do they have in common? They each have a 2, so I can factor out a 2, and they each have at least one factor of x. So I'm going to factor out 2x, divide this by 2x, I'm left with x, divide this by 2x, I'm left with 4. So if that equals 0, then either 2x equals 0, in that case, we already had that one, x equals 0, or x plus 4 equals 0, so x has to be negative 4. All right, and then right here, we want to make it equal 0. So first thing we're going to do is subtract 15n from each side. Okay, first thing we do is set it equal to 0, so now we have it in standard form, 6n squared minus 15n. Is equal to 0. There we go in standard form. Now we factor out and put it in factored form. What do they each have in common? Well, this is a factor of 3, and so does this one, so I can factor out a 3. And they each have a factor of n, so I factor out an n. Divided by 3n gives me 2n here, and then minus 15 divided by 3 is 5, n divided by n is 1. So that's it. Then either 3n is equal to 0, so n is equal to 0, that's one of its roots, or one of its zeros, or 2n minus 5 is equal to 0. So we add 5 to each side, plus 5. Then 2n is equal to 5. Divide by 2 on each side, and n is equal to either 5 over 2 or 2.5, which either way you would like to note that. All right, so my two roots or zeros are 0 and 2.5. Okay, we've got one more example here. It says this is a model for the fireplace. The x-axis represents the floor. Find the width of the arch at floor level. So from here to here, what's that width? Okay, well, that means we need to find these coordinates where it crosses the x-axis. X-intercept, the x-intercept, those are the roots, also known as the zeros, because that's when x is 0. Zeros or solutions. All right, so that means we need to set y equal to 0. Did I say when x is 0? It's when y is 0. Sorry, it's the x-intercept when y is 0. So 0 is equal to negative 1/9 x plus 18, and then x minus 18. So the first thing I'm going to do here to solve is I'm going to get rid of this 1/9. So I'm going to multiply each side by the denominator and get rid of the negative. So I'm going to multiply each side by negative 9. Multiply this side by negative 9. That cancels out the 1/9. Negative times a negative cancels out. 9 times 1/9 cancels out. So now I have 0 is equal to x plus 18 times x minus 18. We looked at this case earlier, right, where we just have x, we just need the opposites. So this one is going to be negative 18, this solution here. X equals negative 18 there, and here x equals positive 18. All right, so this point right there is 18. This is negative 18. Now, that's not the question. The question is, what's the width of the arch? So from negative 18 to positive 18, that's 18 units on this side and 18 units on this side. So you can either do it that way, add 18 plus 18, or you could say that's the absolute value of negative 18 minus 18, the difference of those two values, and that is 36. So there you have it. Good times in the Matherhood.